I have a confession. I know very little about Monster Rancher, which is kind of surprising. The show aired at a time when I'd watch every anime I could, and a few games released on my favorite console, but all I can tell you is this guy's name is Mochi. And now I'm concerned because I don't know how I know that. It seems I missed out on something special though, because so many of the design choices I loved in Mamon King are firmly rooted in Monster Rancher. Don't worry, it's not a secret. Streamer turned game dev Yoshinama wants you to know just how important the series is for him, and I can understand why. Speaking from experience, it's tough watching something you care about lose relevancy. We all try to find our own ways to keep the conversations going, but diving headfirst into game creation might be the most impressive to me. Now, passion alone doesn't guarantee a great game, quite the opposite sometimes, but Mamon King fits comfortably in its niche. The goal of fun above all else makes for an engaging system that even cushions some of the rough edges. Honestly, it's a little bare, but ended up being the perfect template to make my own silly story you'll hear about soon enough. Before we get into that, quick spoiler warning, unless you care about endgame Mamon designs, there's really not much to worry about here. Monster battlers are kind of a weird one for me. I always feel like I play them the wrong way. The goal of collecting every monster and crafting the perfect roster has never been as interesting as turning a few low-tier weirdos into actual gods. It's always a possibility, but feels a bit antithetical to the design. With that in mind, Mamon King feels like it was made for someone like me. You start out with 3 pulls from the Jade Gate, gacha enjoyers rejoice, choose 1 Mamon to train, and that's your team. Technically you can swap at any point, but progression isn't shared. Each Mamon's journey is its own. Being with the same little guy throughout its entire lifespan was such a breath of fresh air. It opened up storytelling possibilities I long for in games like this. The road to becoming a champion felt shared, with much more credit going to the one actually fighting. In a lot of ways, I felt more like a coach and couldn't help but get more attached than I usually would. The highs of victory, the lows of first round eliminations. We were a team, and reaching each milestone was incredibly satisfying. I even found myself thinking deeper about who the Mamon really was, wondering about their personality, how they like to fight, what they do on a rest day, getting a bit lost in the RP. You probably need a bit of whimsy to get the full experience I'm describing, but I think even the most hardened heart will feel something in their Mamon's final days. Hearing that might worry you because, frankly, it worried me, but there are actually a few ways it can play out. Death is one of them, but it kind of feels like the bad ending thanks to inheritance summons. Throughout their lifespan, a Mamon's loyalty grows to you. Once they hit a C rank, you can perform an inheritance summon, letting them pass a bit of their power to their successor. While the old Mamon still ultimately disappears, they give the next generation a chance to push their power even further. It's such a thematically nice way of handling progression. To be honest, I was a bit uncomfortable with the thought of my Mamon dying. It's kind of an unusual concept in a game like this for me. That thought stuck with me throughout my first run of the game, and eventually I figured you're probably not meant to love the idea, and it is a part of life, so I braced myself accordingly. When that day finally came though, my reaction surprised me. I felt an unexpected comfort watching the passing of the torch moment play out. It was like the game reassured me that, hey, their journey mattered too. Plus, it's not like every first attempt in life is perfect. We learn and improve along the way. During my next run through the game, that inheriting generation of Mamon eventually became a champion, and during the celebration, I couldn't help but think about the weight of their shared journey. It was like they were both standing together there. It's a little cheesy, but it was nice. Good job, you two. For all the fun I had, there are weaker parts of the game that became harder to ignore over time. Nothing is broken or unplayable, but after raising a few Mamon, the formula wore pretty thin. Everything is crafted in a way to always keep you moving, which is typically what you want, but I found myself wishing for quieter moments too. The parts of the game where you would naturally expect an intentional moment of reflection or world building were few and far between and ended up feeling pretty undercooked. Perfect example of that, beating the game. For how much I just praised inheritance summons, the act of actually becoming a Mamon King is weird. There's the usual tournament celebration and acknowledgement after, but then you find out your Mamon must be sealed away. Forever. Turns out the only right thing to do after becoming the champion is let someone else have a turn. Fair enough, but why can't they just retire somewhere? It almost encourages you to avoid the final tournament if you're fond of the Mamon you're training. Maybe there wasn't dev time to go deeper into the ending, but I think even a simple goodbye and moving to a sanctuary would have made the ending land a bit better. On its own, an issue like this could be more of a footnote than a glaring problem. Sure, it's the ending, but a good game 90% of the way can more than make up for that in my experience. The problem is, I kept running into moments like this where a little more would have went a long way. Having characters occasionally give you a reward and praise was nice, but eventually I wanted more dialogue. I had similar feelings to the seasonal event Voyages. It was nice when they popped up, but eventually I wanted more to do around town too. Even the option to explore a bit in a limited visual novel style would have given the world more personality. You see what I mean? It's fun and exciting for a while, but I think that while really depends on what you're putting into it. The 5 runs I did through the game had the benefit of my silly coaching RP. When I think back to the game now, it's not the world I'm feeling attached to, which feels like a missed opportunity. But really, whatever. I can make my own fun. Which takes us to the most important part of this video, the legacy of the Dwa dynasty. Back when the game first came out, I streamed it to a few friends. We collaborated on everything and found ourselves way more invested than anyone expected. The first decision we made was probably the most important. Which Mamon do we train? Whoever we chose would define a significant part of the playthrough, so we agreed not to take it lightly. After doing our 3 gate pulls, I left the collection screen open and our quiet moment of consideration began. That moment lasted all of 10 seconds before one friend asked what we were all thinking. It's clearly Skullrod, right? It's true, it was clearly Skullrod. Frankly, I think it would be Skullrod 90% of the time. I mean, look at him. Do you really disagree? Didn't think so. Next up was picking a name. Someone suggested the name Dennis, which we all liked, but fate had other plans. I dropped my controller just before hitting confirm, and the impact added Dwa at the end. I'll never know how that happened, and I'm not trying to recreate it. Thus, Dennis Dwa, the founder of the Dwa dynasty, came to be. It wasn't always easy for him. Early on, it really felt like we lived in a strength-based Mamon's world. Any W's were close, and L's were decisive and plentiful. It didn't take long to pull out of tournaments and focus all our time on the training and bootcamp grind. The stats were mostly a waiting game, but finding the right skill was a pressing concern. Dennis Dwa had decent magic damage, but we noticed early on his true potential was evasion. If you miss one of your limited opportunities to attack, it can be match losing. Enter Matador. Matador is a damage skill that pulls from your evasion stat instead of strength or magic. When Dennis Dwa learned Matador, it was like everything came together. We can invest heavily in evasion without compromising our damage output. Tournament progress resumed, and before we knew it, Dennis Dwa achieved an A rank. But then, the message no one wants to see. Dennis Dwa has hit old age. Be careful. It was clear our dreams of seeing them become a Mamon King weren't meant to be. But S rank? That was still in reach. So we bided our time and let them relax until the next official tournament. Here's the thing, we didn't really know how much pushing and training an older Mamon could take, and we weren't about to risk dying over a few stat points. Anyway, after an extended holiday, the tournament finally came and Dennis Dwa won with confidence. Even old age couldn't stop him from completing the standard tournament circuit. The Mamon King dream wasn't over though, not by a long shot. Dennis Dwa made sure of that by passing his power to his successor. But before that, the committee agreed to gather on another day because it had gotten pretty late and I accidentally skipped dinner. So I made ramen and everyone else slept. When we finally reconvened, we knew that vibes alone weren't going to be enough to make a decision this time. Our future Mamon is inheriting Dennis Dwa's evasion-heavy stats, so we need to choose carefully. For real this time. There was one mild issue. I kind of ended off as a bit of a brokey, so we really were hoping for a heart of the cards situation since we only had a few pulls. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, so there was a lot of debate on who to choose. When the decision was finally made, there were doubters, but our next Mamon proudly stepped up to represent the Dwa dynasty. Enter Underdwa. Things were different from the very beginning. We moved so quickly through the first ranks with minimal breaks for training. Between the stat boost and a lucky item drop that gave them a permanent 100 SP, Underdwa was a machine that turned lower ranks into higher ranks. We actually had to pump the brakes a bit just to make sure health and defense weren't entirely neglected. Aside from that, progress was steady. They even beat 2 legendary Mamon without an issue. Things were looking good. Then we finally saw the gap between the S-rank tournament and the championship circuit. Oh my god. It was like the stat boost meant nothing. There was grinding to be done. It basically took an in-game year to catch up to a point where we could win the first of the 2 tournaments. Part of that was being careful, but it did get a lot tougher, and our win was hard fought. The naive part of my brain thought maybe the final tournament will be about the same, but our rival, Nami, was waiting at the end with a Voltras, a legendary Mamon we had never seen before. Needless to say, the first attempt didn't go well. That's okay, we knew what's due. Underdwa went back to the training grind, signed up for another tournament, and got smoked again. Oh no. It was just after that tournament that the dreaded message popped up again. Underdwa had reached old age. You could feel the uncertainty creep into everyone's mind. Partially because no one had looked up how old age worked, a bit self-imposed there. We talked about the risk and decided to push ahead to one last tournament, being careful not to train too hard. When that last tournament finally arrived, the first 2 matches were actually pretty easy. While it seemed like our training was paying off, we knew our rival's Mamon was a different beast entirely. We took one last look at the stats, took a deep breath, and entered the final battle. Despite our high evasion strategy, Voltras' first attack hit multiple times for over half our health. The call went silent. Underdwa followed up with Matador and took out a third of Voltras' health. Long way to go. Next turn, Voltras charged SP and Underdwa swung again, taking another third of their health. Turn 3. This was it. Voltras got to attack first, and if their attack hit enough times, Underdwa's career would be over. All we could do is trust in the high evasion Dwa Dynasty technique. I selected Matador and took my hands off the controller. Voltras used the attack we expected, everyone braced for it, and Underdwa dodged 4 out of the 5 hits. I think everyone's mic clipped. You couldn't script a moment like that. Underdwa survived the attack, landed Matador, and closed out the fight, becoming the next Mamon King. The mood was joyful. You know, Mamon King isn't a perfect game, but when you can stumble into a moment like that, who cares? Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.